My district is the city of Honolulu, and it stretches all the way from Makapu'u in the east, all the way through Honolulu, up to Mililani Mauka to the boundaries of Wahiawa. Comes back down through Waipahu and Ewa Beach and Kapolei, out to Ko'olina. That's my district. I represent 750,000 people in our great state and our country. The second congressional district is represented by my colleague Kaihali'i. Kaihali is the rest of the state. And I'm focusing here on the entirety of the state because I think we both regard our obligations as to the entire state of Hawaii. I'm coming to you from my district office in downtown Honolulu, where I am home for the week from Washington, D.C., and it's been a very, very full week of trying to catch up back home as we deal with both issues and challenges here in Hawaii as well as nationally and, of course, internationally. This is another teletalk story that I have done with you, my constituents. And I will say straight up front that I hope that the next series of talk stories that I do will be out there in the communities in person, because I miss that very, very much, and I think the time is coming when we can pull that off. And so I look forward to seeing you in your local cafeteria or community hall perhaps later this year. Before I get too far into my opening remarks, I want to recognize two people out there that deserve recognition up front. The first are the people of Ukraine, on the other side of our world, who are under incredible attack right now. Many are dying, many are grievously injured. 6.5 million Ukrainians are displaced in their own country, 2 million refugees. I'll get into Ukraine more, but I think it's just a time for us to pause and remember our fellow citizens of the world on the other side of the world in our thoughts and our prayers. The second person I want to recognize is a friend and colleague that I lost, we all lost about 3 or 4 days ago, Congressman Don Young from Alaska. Don was an amazing guy. He was quintessentially Alaskan. He was the longest serving member of the U.S. House of Representatives. He was first elected in 1973. Don was a Republican, but he had absolutely no problem in working with everybody towards what he wanted to achieve. He worked with Republicans, he worked with Democrats, he had strong beliefs. He was gruff in some ways, but also a heart of gold, would always help. He was a friend to generations of colleagues from Hawaii, where we had a long history and still have a long history of partnering with Alaska on many, many things. Don was a particular friend of Hawaii. He loved Hawaii. He loved the Pacific. And there's a real sense of loss right now. And so I hope you will also keep his family and his home state of Alaska in your thoughts and prayers. Let me give you a bit of an overview and then get into some specific issues that I want to cover with you tonight. This is the second year of a 2-year Congress. Each of our Congresses goes for 2 years. This is the 117th Congress, meaning the 117th time in our country's history that Congress has convened for a 2-year Congress. And of course, it's been an incredibly difficult Congress, as all of our Congresses are nowadays. This Congress started on January 6th of 2021 with the attack on the Capitol. I was on Capitol Hill that day. I remember it very vividly, and we still have much to understand about what happened, and why, and to hold those accountable that need to be held accountable. But that was kind of how this Congress kicked off. We, of course, were in the depths of COVID-19 with some hope on our minds that we would be out of it that year. That didn't happen. We went back into the depths again. And so the entirety of this Congress, as well as half of the last Congress, have been about COVID-19. I'll get into that a little bit more. We knew about some issues that we had to deal with. We were dealing with many, many of the issues of inequality throughout our country, of our relationships with the rest of the world before we started the 117th Congress. But you always have to face issues that you never knew were coming at you. And of course, there are a couple of those definitely that have impacted my time in the 117th Congress. Red Hill, I will get into Red Hill, as well as Ukraine, which I've already mentioned, are just two of those. And all of these issues, whether they be national or local, but especially on the national front, have been compounded and complicated by deep partisan division that has continued on many levels throughout our country, and especially in Washington, that has frankly made the job even more difficult. I try in my own work on behalf of our country, our Hawaii, my district, to really stay focused on a day-to-day, month-to-month, year-to-year basis on the three parts of my job. Number one, making the best decisions I can on behalf of our country with my colleagues in Congress. Number two, very specific to Hawaii, to make our federal government work well for us here in Hawaii. The connection between what our federal government does and the impacts back here in Hawaii, and our specific needs here in Hawaii and how our federal government can help. And then finally, number three, my job also includes very much helping you with your own individual concerns, and we spend a great deal of time in my office trying to help folks with issues such as not being able to get their veterans benefits or their military records, or answers on immigration or on taxes. Those are some of the main areas. But we are up for trying to help you however you need help, whether it's just a reference to a state or a county government or you know, some information that you need. And along those lines, I always welcome your input. I don't do this job alone. I've got partners and resources to apply to serving you in Congress. First of all, of course, I function as part of a delegation of 4 members from Hawaii. Our 2 senators, Senators Schatz and Hirono, and my colleague Representative Kahele and I are your delegation. And it's important that we work together, and we have worked together very, very well. This has been a very, for me personally, satisfying delegation to work with. We don't always agree on every issue, but we always try to talk things through. We agree on most issues, especially as they relate to Hawaii. And it's been a great partnership with my delegation partners. I also work very closely with your state and local government officials who are trying to achieve the same things that we are in terms of just trying to help people and help our communities. We just have different responsibilities, but they overlap a lot, and so I spend a lot of time with our state legislators, with our county council members, city and county council members, and with Governor Ige and Mayor Blangiardi and others, and of course leaders within our community and throughout our community. I consider these full partners. My colleagues in Congress are important to get things done, because for me to get things done for Hawaii, I've got to have those relationships in Congress, and I try to maintain those relationships and to help other colleagues with their own issues, and to ask them for help when we need help. I work in my committees and in my caucuses. The most important by far is my Appropriations Committee, which is responsible for all federal discretionary spending every single year. So that gives me the opportunity to work very closely on the priorities for our country, and especially the priorities for our Hawaii, to mold policy as well as to fund our goals. And I'll get into that a little bit more. I also serve on the Natural Resources Committee, which is an invaluable committee to try to protect our natural resources, which are so abundant here in Hawaii in particular, not just the land and air, but certainly our oceans, where I try to focus very much in terms of the endangered oceans of our world, especially the Pacific Ocean. And that committee also allows me to focus on our Native Hawaiians, because that committee has jurisdiction over all indigenous peoples of our country. I co-founded with Don Young, as a matter of fact, a couple of years ago, and other colleagues on a bipartisan basis, the Pacific Islands Caucus, which is a collection of members of the U.S. House and outside partners that are focused on the islands of the Pacific, our backyard, our ohana, our own part of this world, because as we act collectively with them, we strengthen all. And so that's been an active caucus from my perspective. And then finally, you are part of my team, of my resources, because I welcome the input that you provide to me, the questions that you ask me, the guidance that you provide to me. And that's why I do these talk stories, to let you know what I'm up to, but also to listen to you. And so hopefully this all adds up to a coordinated effort on behalf of my district and my state and my country in Congress. Let me cover about 5 or 6 issues that are top of mind for me that are really taking a lot of my time. I cover a whole bunch of issues, but these are the ones that I think I just want to communicate to you a little bit up front what's going on. Let's start with Ukraine, as I've referenced. Tomorrow we celebrate the 1-month anniversary of the unprovoked, unjustified invasion and attack on a sovereign, independent country by Russia and its president, Mr. Putin. That attack was against all sense of norms in the world as to how we try to avoid conflict and get along in a difficult enough world, the so-called international rules-based order that has gotten us through 75 years plus now, 3 generations of relative world peace. We have not had World War III yet, and we're trying not to have World War III. But the fact of the matter is that Russia's invasion of Ukraine cannot stand for a number of reasons. Number one, it only, as President Zelensky said in his address to a joint session of Congress last week that I was privileged and humbled, really, to attend, a very emotional address, not only by him, but as all of us received it. He said that the attack on Ukraine was not just an attack on a country, not just an attack on its cities, on its countryside, on its people. It was an attack on Ukraine's values, and it was an attack on the world's values. And I believe that. I agree with that. If Russia can get away with this, then the values that we stand for are at great risk. And that's not just from countries like Russia, that's from other authoritarian regimes such as China. Because you can be assured that in our own part of the world, China is watching very closely as to whether Russia can pull this off, in so many words. And if Russia can do it, then why can't China do it with some of its aspirations and goals? And so the stakes are very, very high in Ukraine, and I have supported the initiatives of the President and Congress, my colleagues in Congress, on a bipartisan basis to impose the most comprehensive and most severe sanctions on Russia of any country ever, to include banning Russian imports and exports to Russia. This has been a critical first response among many others. We have also provided aid to Russia. We passed in the Congress a $13.6 billion emergency assistance bill for Ukraine, across the board, humanitarian, but also outright defense capabilities, so weapons to help them to defend their own country. Those are having some effect. We don't know whether they will be sufficient, but it is what we need to be doing, at least initially at this stage. And so I think, as you know, President Biden is in Europe as we speak, making sure that really the world of democratic values remains on the same page as we have throughout the last month. We need to remain on that page. And we're doing what I think we should be doing, but there is a cost to that. The cost is that sanctions aren't free. There are impacts back home. We're seeing some of the results of that in terms of price increases and some shortages from areas where we're particularly dependent on Russia. I think we can handle that, but parts of this country, including Hawaii, have a disproportionate impact. Where our impact comes in is that although Russian oil imports account for less than 2% of total oil use, or fossil fuel use, I should say, in our country, in Hawaii is accounted for 20, 25, sometimes 30% that we have been using Russian imported oil. Why do we do that? Because frankly, it's a lot cheaper to buy it on the world market and ship it here on international shipping than it is to buy our own oil from our own country and ship it here on our own shipping, which costs 3 to 4 times more to ship it. That's the result of the Jones Act. The Jones Act says that if you ship between 2 U.S. ports, you have to use U.S. shipping. there are not enough tankers out there to service the lanes between mostly the continent and Hawaii, if they're available at all, because they are all dedicated somewhere else today. And so that's a situation where that effort by our country, that is the correct effort by both our country and by our state, has a compounding effect here in Hawaii that I think it's unfair for us to bear. So I've asked the President to waive that federal law on a very limited, very targeted basis to open up the oil transshipment game to tankers around the world that can service it, rather than have us held hostage to just a few tankers out there. I'm awaiting an answer from the President. I'll pursue that. Let me cover COVID-19 for a second. We are just about at the 2-year anniversary of COVID-19. It was right about this date 2 years ago that Congress closed and we came home because the country was facing a terrible pandemic that we didn't fully understand, and that we frankly were sorting ourselves through at the time. And of course 2 years has gone by, and it's been a long 2 years. We have now seen almost 1 million of our own ohana in our country die. Many lives disrupted. Obviously the economic impact's very severe. The health impact's very severe. And really one of the only ways we sorted ourselves through that on a national basis was assistance from our federal government in the CARES Act, the American Rescue Plan, and 5 other measures that we passed over the last 2 years that in sum added up to some $6 trillion of federal assistance to see us through this pandemic. A lot of money, considering that in any 1 year we spend somewhere in the range of $1.5 trillion for all of our discretionary spending through my Appropriations Committee. So that was a lot, and I believe it was necessary. I believe that we had to expend those monies to see ourselves through COVID-19 on all levels, whether it be development and distribution of vaccines, or healthcare provider assistance, or individual assistance, or unemployment supplementation, or the whole range of small business loans and grants that we went through, or the direct stimulus payments, or aid to our state and local governments, rental assistance, mortgage assistance. That was all necessary to navigate a pandemic. We saw somewhere around $21 billion of that money come here to Hawaii, and that certainly helped us here in Hawaii. As we now hope that we are coming out of COVID-19, I think we can reflect that it was tough here in Hawaii, especially given the economic impact. But the restrictions that we put in place that were advised by the CDC, the fact that we have the highest rates of vaccinations and boosters virtually in the entire country, has led to the result that in the entire country we had the lowest rates of infection and one of the lowest rates of death in the country. So I think we can reflect that we made, I believe, the right decisions to take care of our own. Now it's time, as we hope we come out of COVID-19, to, as the CDC says, to live with COVID, to try to minimize its spread, but also to try to adjust to it where it is, and to try to return to some sense of normal. But I don't think that's an invitation for any of us to relax. We have a new variant out there, which is referred to as BA.2, which is coming out of Europe and China, but it's here in Hawaii right now. We don't know exactly what the impact of that's going to be. But the bottom line here is that just because our numbers are down, just because we're opening up again, there's no reason not to continue to be vigilant, to be careful, to take care of each other, and of course, as and when further assistance is legitimately needed, then I'm sure that our government will take a look at that assistance. Let me talk about inflation, which is on all of our minds anytime we go to the grocery store, go to the gas pump, or go to the hardware store. This is no way to sugarcoat inflation. This is the worst it's been in decades. This is some of the worst inflation we've seen in a long time. And there are a number of causes for it if you really dig down underneath it. Almost a perfect storm of various causes that all add up to this rate of inflation. We've had stretched supply chains even before COVID-19, which were disrupted even further, so that goods could not get to manufacturing plants and then from them back out to the rest of folks. That created shortages, and shortages always mean an inclination at least to higher prices. That was worsened by international dislocation and war, as we've seen now in the Ukraine, that has started to impact inflation very directly. Certainly COVID-19 had an impact, because there was a great deal of federal spending that I believe, again, needed to be spent, but that means a lot of money out in the communities. And what we saw was that because there was that money to prop up our economies and our communities, but we were in the middle of COVID-19 not spending it, that as we came out of COVID-19, a lot of people started spending again. And of course, if you have a lot of money out there chasing limited numbers of goods and services, that's a pretty good recipe for inflation. And so we're definitely working through that. We've had labor shortages as a result of coming back from COVID-19. And finally, we have pursued some monetary policies that have been aimed at stimulating our economy without focusing so much on inflation, that have caught up with us, really. Low, very, very historically low interest rates, and loose, as they say, monetary policy to encourage money in the economy. And that all added up to record inflation. It's going to be tough to dig our way through this. We've got to do it step by step. We've got to solve our supply chain issues. We cannot spend recklessly or without reason. We have to adjust our monetary policy. I agree with what the Federal Reserve is doing right now, and we have to get people back to work. If we pick off these steps, which we followed in the past, we should be able to come through inflation. But again, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It's not going to be something that happens by tomorrow. So it's a slow and deliberate and conscious approach that is always trying to aim towards the reduction of inflation again. Appropriations. Appropriations is one of the main things I do year to year. Year to year, it doesn't matter what else is going on. I've got to deal with appropriations, because as a member of the committee, I'm number one responsible for federal funding for that year, all federal funding for all of our programs. But number two, because it's also a tremendous opportunity for me to help Hawaii. We just passed our FY 2022 bill that President Biden signed last week, and it was a very good bill, I believe, for both our country, but especially for our Hawaii in many, many areas, whether it be necessary, I believe, defense spending, or spending on our environmental protection or our social safety net, or any number of other areas. There was solid expenditures in that bill that I think were reasonable, and I think prudent, and I think necessary for our Hawaii. And so my job now is to make sure that that money, now that it's appropriated, does actually get here and go to the purposes intended here in Hawaii. And of course, I'm also working already on the next fiscal year, which starts in just a few months. And so FY23 is very much in my sights right now. All of the information on what I've done on appropriations you can find at case.house.gov. I tried to put out a pretty long news release on describing that, and encourage you to go there and ask me any questions. The bipartisan infrastructure package. This was a real success for this Congress among many areas where we have not produced what I believe are landmark successes. But the bipartisan infrastructure package was one effort that I am proud of. This was a $1.2 trillion generational reinvestment in our infrastructure throughout the country. It was, as it's referred to, bipartisan. It was put together by many members, myself included, who just wanted to get the job done, who were kind of tired of our federal government not turning to a long delayed goal of assisting our communities in basic areas such as roads and bridges and sewers and harbors and airports, but also beyond that, more expansive view of infrastructure, our schools, for example, broadband, which is a critical component of the world that we live in, and we saw in spades during COVID-19 the problems that arise if you don't have adequate broadband, adequate connectivity to the internet in areas such as remote learning, remote health care, remote business. We have to have good broadband. And so this infrastructure package that we passed and was signed into law late last year will produce somewhere in the range of, if we do this right, $3 billion for us here in Hawaii to focus on long-standing infrastructure needs, not just broadband, but the other things I referred to. And so for me, the challenge now is kind of like appropriations. We set this up for success, and now we have to make sure it actually does succeed. Finally, let me cover Red Hill, which certainly has been one of my very top priorities during this Congress. Three good things have happened in the last couple of weeks on Red Hill after weeks and months of even years of disappointment. The first and foremost, of course, was the order by the Secretary of Defense, the head of our Defense Department, that Red Hill would close. Not just refuel, but close. That was number one. Number two, in the appropriations bill that I referred to, we were able to obtain $700 million in the current fiscal year to help with the remediation, the cleanup, the placement of people back into their homes and the next steps of Red Hill. And that was after $400 million that we were able to obtain just a few weeks ago in an emergency appropriations bill. Very unusual to obtain it, but we did. And so we've got about $1.1 billion to work with in the current fiscal year. And it is necessary. This is going to be very expensive. And it's not going to stop at $1 billion. It's going to be in the billions by the time we get all the way through this and to our goal of closing Red Hill and providing our military with a replacement reserve fuel capacity in the Indo-Pacific. And then number three, just a few days ago, the last of the flushing was completed, and the Department of Health approved the use of the water again in the homes of 8,100 families who were displaced wrongly, living under very, very difficult circumstances for the last number of months, far longer than any of us had hoped, but they're back in their homes now, or at least they're able to go back to their homes. And I think that's all very good news. However, in the same breath, we have lots to do still. We have to complete the review and understanding of exactly what went wrong at Red Hill and why. We have to do that because we have to decide what needs to be fixed. We have to decide what needs to be fixed and fix it, because without that, there's no sense in moving that fuel. There's too much of a risk. If we don't know why it leaked to start with, we shouldn't be moving all of that fuel out of Red Hill. But as soon as we know all of that, then we can defuel. And of course, we have to defuel it and place that fuel elsewhere before we can close Red Hill. And so there are steps that we need to go through. It's frustrating sometimes that the steps, take some time to achieve, because after all, I think we all know what the goal is, and we'd like to get there as soon as possible. But I think they do have to be taken deliberately. They have to be funded, as I've pointed out. And I'm in full partnership with my congressional delegation colleagues in exerting every bit of oversight, exerting every bit of ability to fund, and clearing every hurdle that we can do to get through this process as soon as we can. I got a ton of other issues to talk to you about, but I don't want to go any further on what's on my mind. I'd rather turn this over to you for your questions. Just some of the other issues, our climate change and our environmental protection, assuring our social safety net, crime, which is on the top of all of our minds right now, and how our federal government can assist our law enforcement communities, Homelessness continues to be a major concern. I was yesterday morning with Anton Krocki, who is Mayor Blangiardi's Director of Community Services. We did a full tour of incredible facilities, incredible people with the Institute for Human Services and other institutions of their efforts to really provide the continuum that will take folks that are unsheltered all the way from the streets or underneath the bridges where they are living through transition services to temporary housing into permanent housing. And so there's lots to be done, there's lots to talk about. I'm going to pause there and turn this over to your questions. And I apologize, but for those of you that want to ask me the question, but I've got a bunch here, and so I'm just going to start reading them rather than turn this over to you to ask them. Hope you understand. If we have time at the end, I'll do that. But I'm gonna take the questions right now. Excuse me. Would you please clarify your proposal, as reported by Civil Beat, to exempt Hawaii from the Jones Act protected maritime cabotage? I spoke to that a little earlier, and I'll just expand a little bit. And by the way, this is also on my website at case.house.gov, where I did put out a release and statement on my efforts that I hope will be more explanatory to you. You can also write me, and I'll send you a full explanation. But again, the Jones Act is the 102-year-old federal law that basically says that when you ship goods between two U.S. ports, you must use shipping that was built in the United States, flagged in the United States, and a number of other things that are specific to the United States. And that makes sense on some levels, especially if you have a lot of these ships. However, we now only have somewhere around 98 total such vessels, Jones Act ships, in the entire United States. And we're not the only game in town. And so these ships are in very, very high demand. These ships are how we get all of our goods from the continent, which is 90+% of everything that we import into Hawaii. Everything we use, our wood, our lumber, our agricultural products, our food, our drink, you go down the list. Almost all of it comes in on the Jones Act ships. And so obviously if you have that kind of demand on your shipping lanes and you don't have too many ships and nobody else can get into the game, then that's going to drive prices up. And that's exactly what's happened with the Jones Act. And I don't think that's fair. I don't think that Hawaii should be held hostage to this situation, to this particular bill. And I think that transshipment should be open to some competition from the rest of the world. I'm fighting that battle on a big picture. I've introduced bills to exempt Hawaii from the Jones Act, to put cost controls on the Jones Act shipping. But that's not what I'm talking about right now. What I'm talking about is the specific situation where the Jones Act has, I believe, a completely unforeseen impact on our ability to get oil here for our fossil fuel based energy, because fundamentally it makes no sense to me that with fossil fuels still available in our country, that we could not actually ship it here more economically than to go to some place like Argentina, which is where we're forced to go now for the replacement of Russian oil. So I believe that when we bring in fossil fuel for the duration of this emergency, that we should be able to go to the international shipping. That's the fundamental goal that I'm trying to achieve with my request for a waiver from the Jones Act. Claire, I'm having difficulty with the SBA Idle. So this is the Small Business Administration Economic Injury Disaster Loan, which was a key component for many small businesses to survive the pandemic. The Idle loans were available We had, I think the figure, as I recall, was in the tens of thousands of our local businesses which were able to take advantage of either EIDLE or the Paycheck Protection Program or PPP loans. And much of those loans were actually forgiven by the federal government under the terms of our emergency assistance for COVID-19. Anyway, Claire writes that she's having difficulty as they keep making errors and do not call me back. I was told to contact you in order for my loan done with the SBA Idle Congressional Intervention High Priority Team to get a loan officer to contact me. So yes, please contact me. Again, you can do that through case.house.gov, or you can email me at ed.case@mail.house.gov. But far easier for you, just go on the website, and there'll be a click there where you can get in touch with us right away. My phone number is also there, by the way, if you prefer to call. This is exactly what we've done for folks for the last 2 years. We've tried to cut through the red tape. We've tried to get people help with federal resources that have been available for COVID-19. And the EIDLE loans, by the way, are not just COVID-19 specific. They're supposed to help in economic injury situations. And so sometimes it can be quite frustrating to understand them, and sometimes it can be quite frustrating to get the right answers. So we do want to help you on that, and anybody else that's having comparable issues. Can the U.S. Postal Service be stopped from purchasing 90% of their new trucks to be gas powered? This is a major issue right now for us because, as the caller Bob is pointing out, the U.S. Postal Service or I won't say that the U.S. Postal Service has the option to proceed, really like the rest of the vehicle industry, to far more green, friendly, and forms of transmission through the U.S. Postal Service. A huge fleet. I'm trying to remember what the stat was, but I think I read in my materials getting ready for this 40,000 or something like that. And so obviously that's a huge opportunity for us to move towards electric vehicles, to move towards other alternatives. And the U.S. Postal Service, at least, has somewhat been resistant to that. Now, I'm sympathetic to them on some level because they have been under incredible financial strain, and I think probably what's happening is that they are focusing on kind of the short term as opposed to a long-term goal. We have tried to help them out and have helped the U.S. Postal Service out. I believe in the U.S. Postal Service with some of their major expenses, such as pension contributions, for example. But on this particular one, I think they should utilize their market power to move in a different direction in terms of how they utilize their vehicles and how they utilize their energy needs to a more future-oriented approach. And I am on congressional expressions of intent that the U.S. Postal Service not pursue this policy. They are a semi-independent agency. They're not directly subject to congressional specifications. So we're going to have to keep on working on this one. This is Arlene. What preparations are being taken to prepare for a water shortage this summer? I believe, Arlene, what you're referring to are comments and statements by Ernie Lau, who is the head of our Honolulu Board of Water Supply. Ernie has come out in the last couple of weeks and months and basically said in so many words that we need to start conserving our water, that we need to start preparing for the possibilities, at least, of constraints on our water. He has mentioned this in the context of Red Hill because, of course, here in Honolulu, central Honolulu, I should say, the aquifer that Red Hill sits over, and where the leak occurred is our largest aquifer on this island, and it services our water needs primarily all the way from Hawaii Kai to, say, Aiea or so. And so Mr. Lau has estimated that we had to reduce our withdrawals as a result of the Red Hill leak, somewhere in the range of 20%. There were already pretty high demands on water usage even before Red Hill. We were approaching the limits of what's referred to as maximum sustainable yield, which is a way of saying that you don't want to take more water out of the aquifer than's going into it, because otherwise you cause the aquifer tremendous damage, including mixing with salt water, which is all around it. And so I think Ernie is providing all of us with a tremendous caution that not only is our overall water use starting to tap the aquifer, but we still don't know what happened. How much longer term damage was done to the water from the Red Hill leak. And so he is exercising caution. I don't believe that he has said that there will be a water shortage this summer. But I think he's certainly saying be careful. He doesn't want to go to kind of the system of rationing or anything like that. But the bottom line is I think we all need to be a lot more conscious and careful of our water. Certainly there are very large scale water usages that probably are a little outmoded nowadays. For example, irrigating our golf courses with high quality water that should be really devoted to drinking when those golf courses have other possible sources of water, such as some of our treated wastewater, which is true of many golf courses throughout our world. And so we all have to be part of this, and we'll just have to see where we go on it. But certainly it's a warning sign from Mr. Lau, and I think we should all take it seriously. But I don't think we should sit here and think that we're going to run out of water this summer. But definitely something to be concerned about and to heighten our focus. Manu, can the federal government help Hawaii get desalinization and aquaculture projects started in Hawaii? I don't know about the desalinization. I haven't. I'll have to. If you can email me through ed.kays@mail.house.gov, I can look into the desalinization side of it. I'm not aware of any large scale, at least, projects along those lines. It may be because again, it's probably related to the fact that we thus far do have available water, but certainly if we got into a water shortage situation, we would have to investigate a lot of different alternatives, as have other countries. I've, for example, been to Israel, which has a water shortage, and they have massive desalinization. So it could just be the critical need. It could be the economics of a relatively small population against the cost of such a project. But anyway, I think it's a very worthwhile question. I'd like to check it out and get back to you. On the aquaculture side of it, though I can tell you that I very, very much support aquaculture, first of all. Second, we have funded federal efforts to support research and development of aquaculture. And we do fund that to Hawaii, and Hawaii does do some aquaculture. But I always have thought that aquaculture is an unrealized potential for us here in Hawaii. We've never really gotten to where some of the rest of the world is on aquaculture, and I'm very interested in doing that. I've co-sponsored a bill that tries to update our federal regulations which are really a mess of conflicting regulations on permitting aquaculture operations in our oceans. That's called the Aqua Act, actually, AQUAA Act. Happy to send you some information on that. We're going to try to move that either this Congress or whatever the 118th Congress composition is. I hope it moves then as well. But it's a very good question, and it's an area that I'd love to share some further information with you on. Arlene, I'm gonna go to somebody else, Arlene. I'm just gonna get the people with the first questions first. I'll answer you on it if you want to email me. Joanne, what is the rationale for putting although country, I think that's our country, further in debt? I think you mean debt, or at least that's the way my staff has it, and putting the burden on hardworking taxpayers. Well, I completely agree, first of all, with your concern about our country's debt, and I've taken many actions in Congress along those lines with some of my caucuses, the primary one being my Blue Dog Caucus, which is very, very much focused on fiscal responsibility for our country and sustainable long-term finances and debt, and we have been concerned very, very much about the deterioration in our debt. Now, some of that was frankly very difficult to avoid, especially in the midst of COVID-19, where the $6 trillion that we spent, and I believe we had to spend, was borrowed money. It wasn't raised because we raised taxes. That would have been pretty tough to raise $6 trillion of taxes in the middle of a tremendous pandemic. That would, I think, be the wrong policy. However, the fact of the matter is we did crash through very, very high levels of debt, $30 trillion as a matter of fact. When I came into Congress at the beginning of this Congress, just 14, 15 months ago, we were down at 23, 24 trillion. And so that'll show you how rapidly our debt is deteriorating, and the reality is that we haven't faced the music, that we cannot continue to spend more than we're bringing in, and that raises very, very difficult choices that frankly oftentimes people just run away from. What's the right level of spending? What's the right level of revenues to support that spending? You can't just keep borrowing it. There are mechanisms that we have in place to control this. One is called PAYGO, which is short for Pay As You Go, and that is a simple rule of Congress that, to be honest, is honored too much in the breach, which basically says, in so many words, that your actions should be revenue or debt neutral, I should say. In other words, if you're going to spend new money, then either you reduce it, the spending somewhere else, or you raise revenue to support that higher level of spending. And similarly, if you're going to cut taxes, then you either offset that with taxes coming from somewhere else, or you reduce spending. We have tried to implement and fight for PAYGO. It's an easy one for folks to just avoid when they want to, but I think that is probably the mechanism that's going to help us the most if we can be true to that mechanism, as I definitely support us doing. Let's see, Clyde, on the subject of oil, it's good about what you're proposing on the Jones Act, but how confident are you that Hawaii can get U.S. produced oil when we are short 4 million barrels and when we're looking at importing oil from other countries such as Venezuela? Well, first of all, I don't support importing oil from Venezuela. I know that's an issue with some, but I don't think we solve our problem by substituting imports from one authoritarian regime for imports from another authoritarian regime, and the two of them happen to be best buddies, and so I'm not in support of that. What I'm in support of is us having all options on the table for us to get oil where we can get oil from in a way that is the most economic to the people of Hawaii. If we can continue to get oil and replace the Russian oil that we're importing from some other countries such as Argentina, such as Colombia, a lot of our oil today comes from Libya. We've had oil from places like Indonesia. If we can continue to get that, all power to us. If we can get it here on international shipping and on a cost-effective basis, then we should try to do that. But here's the reality: we have correctly gone cold turkey on 20% of our imports. And so you don't snap your fingers and replace that 20% just immediately. You have to go to any market that's available. And the fact of the matter is that the U.S. market is at least severely disadvantaged for us to use because it costs so much to get it from the continent to Hawaii. That's not fair. So we should be able to take advantage of all of those opportunities and to have every option on the table to replace the Russian oil with oil that we can, put into our gas tanks and use for our electricity and other energy rather than being hostage to some 102-year-old law that never contemplated this situation. Craig, is it possible to get more federal funds to help Honolulu finish the rail? The immediate possibility for further federal funds to contribute to HART is the remainder of the monies that were promised to Hawaii, and promise is not the right word. We made a deal with the federal government, and that was basically, and the feds are the Federal Transit Administration, the FTA. The deal was, the FTA said, we'll give you $1.5 billion as long as you promise to finish the rail to Ala Moana and do it in a cost-effective way and your financials all prove out. Now we know that our financials didn't prove out. And we already have $750 million of that from the feds. And the situation has been that the feds are entitled to not only deny us the $750 that they haven't paid to us, but to ask for a refund of the other $750 because they would possibly regard that as a breach of our agreement, which is referred to as the full funding agreement. I have been working very closely with HART and with the FTA and with our colleagues in the city and county of Honolulu and by the way, the rest of my delegation, so I'm not doing this alone. Number one, not get ourselves into a situation where we have to give $750 million back, but number two, to get the rest of that $750 million. And that's the key for us right now. Mayor Blangiardi, as you know, last week announced that he was going to try to revise the plan to go to Civic Center, a couple of stops short of Ala Moana. And they are putting together a revised financial proposal to the FTA that they hope the FTA will approve, and that would start to spring, and that would take the pressure off any potential refund and start to spring the remaining $750 million loose. And so that's our primary goal right now in terms of additional federal money. I think we've got to make sure that we develop a real credible track record with the federal government, to include Congress, in terms of financial plan and in demonstration we can stick to that plan both schedule-wise and cost before there's really any possibility of additional federal funding. And even in that situation, I think it's unlikely. So we will have to pursue the plan that we have, which has a major federal component to it. Michelle, in regards to bills presented in Congress, have you ever voted contrary to your other Hawaii members in Washington? If so, how often and what was it? I'm sure I have. I mean, I don't know off the top of my head what the actual stats are on it. I will say to you that I think that it's fair to say that my fellow Hawaii delegation members and I generally agree on things, and we certainly agree on things that relate directly to Hawaii. Where we tend to disagree, it's because we're disagreeing on national issues, national policy. I think, one example, we've been talking about the Jones Act here. I'm not sure my colleagues on the delegation share my views on the Jones Act. And so, I think, hey, we're partners. We work together well, but that doesn't mean that we're, clones of each other. Nor should we be. I mean, we all are individual people. We have our individual perspectives. We're all, elected in a slightly different way by slightly different constituencies. And so the fact is that I think it's good that we agree on a lot of stuff, especially Hawaii, but we reserve the right to disagree with each other. And certainly I, in my own voting, have tried to make the right decisions. And if that puts me at odds sometimes with either my colleagues on the delegation or my own party, then that's the way it is. Let's see, Dan, thank you so much for your strong support, including support of the PACT Act, which passed the House just recently. Thanks, Dan. And I think if you're a veteran, I especially want to thank you for that comment. The PACT Act that we passed deals with really a tragedy for many of our service members who were exposed to highly toxic substances and yet have been unable to demonstrate a connection between that exposure and disabilities, severe disabilities, in order to get veterans disability benefits or veterans benefits, and that's unfair. That's not pono, right? So the burn pits. I think Agent Orange in Vietnam, where we did correct much of this particular issue by saying, hey, if you were in Vietnam and you got these diseases, we're going to assume it came from Agent Orange. You were exposed. We didn't go the next step with the burn pits in Iraq and Afghanistan and other situations. And the PACT Act tries to say, no, we're not going to make people jump through the hoops to demonstrate that what the cause was of getting sick in these circumstances. Okay, I'm sorry, but my time has arrived. I've got 6 or 7 questions still here, and if each of you will email me at ed.case@mail.house.gov or go to case.house.gov, we will get your questions answered. And again, I invite each and all of you to stay in touch with me. Go to my website, contact us, call us with any thoughts you have about what our country needs in terms of some of the major issues we face in the world or within our country. In terms of the first part of my responsibility, which is as your representative in making the right decisions for our country. If you have any thoughts or needs or ideas about how our federal government can better help us here in Hawaii, to the second part of my job. And then finally, again, I would emphasize for your own individual concerns and needs, whatever they may be, my office is open. My staff and I are here to help. It is our privilege to serve you, and I thank you for listening in tonight, and I thank you for your partnership as we try to make the best decisions for our country and state and communities. So with that, this is Congressman Ed Case. I'm signing off, and you have a great evening. Be safe and be well. Mahalo.